every second and fourth Thursday of the month at noon Mountain, we will be here with a new presentation. During this presentation, you may come up with questions. If you do, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to send in your question, as all of you are muted during this presentation. Your question will be addressed at the end of the presentation. Now, I would like to introduce you to today's presenter, an ANA past president and professional educator of 38 years. Walt Ostromecki is a prolific hobby collector, writer, speaker, and youth family involvement activities educator. He has received numerous top numismatic honors and awards, including ANA's highest, the Farron Zerby, I'm sorry, I mess it up every single time I say it, in 2020, and Numismatic News Ambassador Award in 1988. Walt will be presenting selected romance tales within numismatic lore. Walt, it is all yours.
Okay, I'll share the screen here if that's correct.
Yep.
We will do that. Well, thank you all for being here today. I hope you'll find this sort of amusing and interesting, but let me start off quick here let's go right on down the line.
And then Walt, if you'll put that in the slideshow and then present mode like we did earlier.
Did we not get that? I thought we had it in my area.
There it is. There you go.
All right. I thought we had it. Okay.
It's okay.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad. Put it in writing. My staff will love it. Anyway, folks, hopefully you'll enjoy this program. It's part of the NumismaTalks program of the ANA, but it's a virtual attempt at bringing excerpts from a book alive, as you probably will note as we go through it. But I had the privilege many years ago of working with Ed Rochette. And some 30 years ago, a numismatic scrapbook writer of acclaim, Mr. Edward C. Rochette, and later ANA executive director for nearly 25 years, along with a crew back in the late 1980s, nose deep into government archives and notes, individual personal letters, yellowed newspaper clippings, etc., to find and share their factual truths and often made up amusing tales surrounding numismatic individuals and items. As I mentioned, I had the privilege of, and here's the particular book, and at the end, I hope that you will read this. I know it's available in the ANA library, but this is the book by Mr. Rochette. Anyway, well, what you're going to discover today, I hope and enjoy, is the genuine facts surrounding about a dozen stories that are from Mr. Rochette's book. And I selected the stories because, well, today in 2024, a lot of these are still circulating as true. Now, some have a humorous point, and that's part of the romantic offering. But I hope this will be an offering of enlightenment, enjoyment, education, and a fun-filled, heart-pounding romantic, adventure for all of you. Well, to demonstrate our numismatic, the reason is to demonstrate our numismatic hobby, which can be filled with limitless, thought-provoking stories, tales, outright fibs, or if you want to call them lies or legends there. So if you please, you'll find out there's a lot of information behind this. So sit back in your chair, relax, have a cold one that might help ease the pain, and enjoy this presentation. And keep in mind, as a hobbyist, to always enjoy and have fun with your hobby. Okay, here we're going to begin with the first one. And I pose you a question. I know it's hard for an audience online to answer, but we'll keep it in mind as we go through this. First one here: was an actual woman or a concept design used for the Miss Liberty portrait design on U.S. coinage from roughly the late 1870s to about 1904, and then again from about 1921 to 1935. And you have there on your screen to the left in the green, there's a focus clue. The woman's portrait used by George T. Morgan for his 1877 and 8 bland dollar coin, which would also be used for the Morgan dollar coin beginning in 1878. As you can see, they're in blue, and I use this to move your focus. People say I don't like colors and slides. Well, this helps you focus on the answers and the questions while you're listening. And the answer, of course, here is yes. Anna Willis Scott. Later on, she married and became Williams, but at age 18. Now, let's look at a couple of notes here. The story of her facial portrait, the Goddess of Liberty, was used by Morgan on his newly designed silver $1 coin. This was before the Morgan dollar. It was called the Bland dollar, design of 1877. Fact. This is the research that Rochette and others did to make this possible. A faded black and white photo of her was later discovered in Morgan's files from 1877 at the Philadelphia Mint to factually corroborate a tale for many years and years on as true. Her story about this revelation did not appear, however, in newspapers or in newsprint until the New York Mail here and Express roughly printed it 35 years later. And here you can see the portrait that was colorized by Mr. Rochette and his crew of the Lady Miss Liberty. And I put arrows there so you'll note the features of the nose, the chin, of course, and the cheeks. And here we see a colorized version of her actual portrait compared to that of a Morgan dollar. So yes, she was in fact the portrait. But the question that's lingered over the years and was printed there in a newspaper article, which I'll show you in just a bit, was Miss Liberty, according to a news item, which of course people love to take the news on face value, was she ever, or did she ever become a poor, destitute street bag lady? Yep. See bag ladies of that time period here. And the answer is yes. Newspaper headline, New York Mail Express, Friday, April 24th, 1908. She finally receives, of course, here, the credit as a model for Miss Liberty, which everyone had denied. But the story reads in part, Caroline Williams, whose portrait was selected for the 1878 Bland dollar coin, has become what? Institutionalized. She was found wandering the streets of New York in rags. Yes, that was news really then. So it appears that she was indeed, what? A penniless, destitute Miss Liberty, a bag lady. Simple as that. Of course, later in life. But you might ask yourself, well, how can this be? Why? Her portrait was on those coins. George Morgan designed them. Well, look at the fact down there near the bottom. The answer here is, in fact, what did she receive for her portrait use? This is the shocker we found. For being the portrait of model, she received what? Nothing. Not even one single Morgan dollar afterwards, when her facial portrait continued to be used. And that's out of what? The 22 million plus coins struck from 1878 to 1904. And if one thinks about it, the ultimate, even greater snub prior to this news article was absolutely no credit as Miss Liberty. So the newspaper did do something to help her and understand that, well, she was not. Second item we're talking about here, has the U.S. ever used a model, to date that is, ever featured the portrait of a wild Irish rose? You may say, well, what does he mean, a wild Irish rose? Well, it's not the flower. And as a botanist, I would know that. But a genuine wild Irish rose lady. Again, people say no. Well, yes. And this is her story. Miss Mary Cunningham, age 24, from Cornish, New Hampshire. State to keep in mind, a city to keep in mind. A fact-based supported true numismatic story, which appeared here, the New York Times, December 15th, 1907. Miss Cunningham at the time was a waitress in a tavern in Cornish, New Hampshire, which was close to the summer home and estate of a very famed U.S. sculptor. I'm sure I'll give you a couple of seconds here to give some thoughts as to whom. And now we will proceed on to see, well, look at this. Albert St. Gaudens was charged with the task of redesigning U.S. coinage worthy of a civilized nation by President Theodore Roosevelt. That's a correct quote from Roosevelt's book there. But he set out immediately to work on 3 denominations: the cent, the $10 gold coin, the $20 gold coin. And he spent many an hour, many a day, sketching and designing portraits, but just wasn't satisfied with any facial sketch design he required for Miss Liberty. Well, as fate would have it, and here again, fate plays a role too, he just decided to have lunch at the Cornish Inn in New Hampshire. Of course, his studio was just a stone's throw from it. There, and Miss Cunningham just happened to wait on him. At first sight, he knew, this is the part, he knew her facial portrait was one that he had been seeking. He immediately set to work, of course, designing and sketched her. And the result, of course, became a part of the numismatic romance history. Her days as a tavern waitress were over. Looked like she made it out quite well here. Well, Gaudens employed her what? As a domestic in his household. Didn't want to lose the beauty. And of course, a always standby coin portrait model design if needed. Her facial portrait adorned the $20 gold coins, which were struck at about 6 weeks after his death. But there's more to the story too. Here's part of the article on the right side of your screen here from the newspaper. The woman who served as model for the coins. Harry Cunningham, the young, goes on to talk about it. And she was a waitress and had all this to do it. The actual newsprint, they wouldn't send me but a picture of the thing. So nowadays they don't have things on microfiche or microfilm anymore. But her facial portrait, and we'll do the comparison here. Look at her picture here, and then we'll move on to the next one. And again, I've used some arrows here to highlight her facial features. On the left, of course, you have the 1907 article close-up photo of Miss Cunningham. And on the left, you see the $20 gold piece. Notice the same chin, the same nose, the same lips, the cheeks. You had a thing with cheeks, and the eyes. Look at the eyes here. It's just amazing as to what he designed. And here, look today, if you are a gold coin collector, like many of us are, in 2023, 1-ounce gold Liberty American Eagle piece, which still bears her charming portrait today. Of course, there's a little bit more of a smile on this particular one design, been refined just a little bit, but I doubt it. So yes, there was a wild Irish rose pictured and still is pictured today. But we'll go on to something else. Y'all are sitting at home and happen to have your wallet or purse close by. Maybe you want to pull out a $5 bill. You can work along with me here, but I suggest you do it afterwards. The story here is of the secret number in the shadow on the reverse of the US $5 bill. Now, you might want to ask, wait a minute, was he making it up? Well, stories have long circulated about this issue, but is the question, well, something we wonder about. Many a sharp-eyed collector has always seen the number 3172 hidden in the bushes to the left, leading to the stairs at the base of the Lincoln Memorial. So become a detective here on your own. Test your eyes out on the $5 bill after this presentation. I suggest using an older notes. If you have any of those printed from the 1950s to 1970s, it shows up better on this one. Let's move on here and do some exploring on our own here. Here we are focusing on the note. Follow the arrow. If you have one at home, you can look at it briefly, but we're going to zero in right below that purple arrow on the left side of the note. And if we zoom in, the black and white shows better than color, either way. You'll note between the 2 arrows there, the green arrows. Look at that. Is that a number you see there? Look at. So then there must be some secrecy since that number is there. Well, so what does a secret number mean? Well, for the answer, of course, Mr. Rochette did his research as well. And the mysterious $64,000 question on the $5 bill, Mr. Rochette turns to an authoritative government source at the time. This is Mr. Robert Louver, who is the executive director of the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. Past and deceased, he was also an executive director for a short time for the ANA. But here we find he's the one we're going to ask. Why would we ask him? Well, because it was his duty as the director over the years to oversee the design approval on and production of all U.S. currency, even those that were redesigned or touched up a bit by engravers over the years. So his candid reply to Mr. Rochette was, well, the number goes back a long time in lore and currency, but actually has no significance. He's acknowledging there's a number there, is he not? The so-called figures are, what is he saying here? Mere quirks of the engraver's art. Oh boy, what a disappointment that was. So factually, there is no number there. It's simply the engraver's design put on the note. Can you beat that? Well, if you're like me in a number of times back, number 4 here we're going to look at, do you remember the Nixon 1970s and the odd even gas rationing days? We may have that again shortly too. We don't know about that, but the future of the situation worldwide. But back then there was an oil crisis. OPEC, what? Stopped sending oil to the United States. And like me, you used to remember no gas. You'd go to a gas station, no gas. Well, painful abroad. Look at this. Well, I remember this too. My typical Texaco here in California. Long lines, nothing. People waiting, fighting each other. No gas. Well, so what story are we going to cover here? Well, it seems that the government, under the Nixon administration, for fear that the embargo would last for a long time and really affect our economy, they decided to print coupons, gas coupons. And below here is an example of one. You know, it may not seem like an interesting story, but is it true, fact, or fiction? Well, this particular item is in my collection, and I note about it there towards the end. But it's a 1973 1-cent gas ration coupon in my collection. I got it from one of the other ANA presidents, Bob Campbell, who's also a dealer at All About Coins in Utah in 1991. This particular unreally signed or dated note actually cost then about $90. Well, today in 2024, one sold on eBay in 2018 for $455 plus shipping. So what's the story? What kind of romance are we looking here? Well, let's delve into that a bit. Now, we all know that Congress has official records on everything. All the government agencies have official records on everything, do they not? And it's interesting here, this is the comment from the 1973 official congressional record, which states the total destruction of all, keyword, all 1973 gas coupons, which is corroborated by the Inspector General's office. And the sworn statement, this is the fact of that sworn statement. All are accounted for and destroyed. Well, let's delve into the facts about this. True or false? Tale or myth? Legend? Well, we'll see. Fact. The Department of Energy official report states that only 4.8 billion were printed. But take a look here. Those of you that are mathematicians or not, get your abacus out. We can do this quickly. But they were accounted for 4,819,400,000. 19.4 million more than were printed. I don't know. I think our government has a lot of trouble with facts and figures when it comes to math numbers here. Well, let's take a look at the process here. Their destruction, according to the Department of Energy, took place on June 26th, 1984. Wow. We're looking at 11 years after they were printed. And it was witnessed by officials of the Office of the Inspector General at the Pueblo Armored Depot in Colorado, where they had been stored since 1973. Must be a safe place to have them stored. So how many examples of the 19.4 million got out and exist today in 2024? Well, some thoughts for consideration. Since all 1973 coupons were kept in storage sheds at an Army depot, the safety was no problem. Yet, if we look into it deeper, we do a little more research, we find out they were easily accessible to anyone on or visiting the base for approximately 11 years before being supposedly destroyed. So fact, the first coupons appeared for sale, guess what? A depot outside the Air Force Base at the time, markets in 1984. These were openly offered for sale at varying prices up to $50 each to the public and collectors. Fact, newspapers, the daily news or on the evening news, reports noted that these were done by military personnel from the base and family members. So question is, well, if they were all destroyed, how did these exist? If it didn't, what official action was taken? None, period. Oops. Perhaps maybe a pre-Watergate cover-up thought? Well, they exist today, and the government figures need to reflect that. Well, how about just for the fun and laugh? That's part of the romance here in numismatics for us to enjoy, courtesy of the Philadelphia Mint. And it says a repeated historical event fallacy. And if we take a look here at the medal on the screen, it's the obverse and reverse of the 1969 bronze golden spike medal. Of course, on the left is the obverse side with the P mint mark and the dates. And on the back, on the right here, a fact check, it shows the date. Now, the important thing here is for the arrow, the Pacific Railway is completed statement, right? And the date it was completed was May 10th, 1869. Yeah, but our history books are wrong then, perhaps. Well, little research, and it shows some interesting facts. So what about this historical fallacy I just mentioned? You mean history fibbed about the actual date of the Golden Spike ceremony as being 12:47 p.m. on May 10th? I can't believe it. Well, fact is, yeah, history records that exact time the rails met at Promontory Point was 2:47 p.m. Well, as we're going to see, this is a stretch, a fib, maybe a tale or whatever from actual reality. So what's wrong? Why? Well, first off, we need a little bit of background as to that particular day when the railroad's engines met and that golden spike was driven in. First, what really happened? Now, we got to remember here, there were two different crews. You had an Irish crew and you had a Chinese crew on both sides, bringing the crew from west to east together for that final tie, but it wasn't in place at the time, and it was scheduled to come together when a ceremony took place. And instead, the recorded time of 2:47 is just an actual tale, courtesy of the photographer, as we shall see. He was the one that was going to set the time. So that would be officially the date that we see above. A very important fact, though, before we move on a little bit more, take a note on this proceeding. Now, keep in mind, we have Chinese immigrants, and we're talking in the 1860s here. The Chinese, mine did not have great command of the English language. However, a singular word to them shouted to the photographer, or by the photographer, or by his associate, at that moment, shoot, had a meeting. Now think about it. got crews, maybe 15 or 20 on each side. They're standing around. Indians have met. And well, Chinese have this problem, it's said. And for them, the word shoot meant, what does it say there? It meant danger, run for your lives. So now I'm sure you can guess as to the actual fact here, what really happened at 2:47 p.m. with the photographer to capture that event when the last tie was set, and his assistant at that precise moment yelled the word shoot. Oh, all hell broke loose, we found out, as the Chinese crew scattered, running for their lives in all directions. Good. Okay. Well, you think it was actually struck at that time? I don't think so. This is the facts that history doesn't want you to know about. Maybe it's not important. It's good to have good lore about it. But it took a great deal of persuasive coaxing to get the Chinese to return to work. Already delayed, the time was well past 12:47. And the official ceremony, however, it was started to be recorded at that time period. I'm sure you all know the rest of the recorded history when Leland Stanford and the other officials finally did it. Well, the additional historical facts that the rail tie between the two coasts was not completed and would not be completed for several years. People forget about the fact that there was a barrier called the Mississippi River, which had not yet been bridged. So there was no rail connecting the East and the West together. Sidebar thought, well, maybe something a little more on the romance side as far as I can see. But thoughts as to where the one gold made for the official spike was, and there were many others made by Leland Stanford as well, was it cast from? Well, fact, according to mint records at San Francisco, US $20 gold pieces were noted as being used. And I use the word probably because I wasn't there to look at the records myself, but from the San Francisco Mint. So in closing our story here, our romantic story here, we share a bit of humor. The meaning of the P, mint mark. Now, on the 1969 commemorative Golden Spike medal. And the answer was, at the time this medal was released, it became synonymous with Fort Bowie. Well, again, that's part of the romance. Doggone it. Well, what about the 2007 Utah State Quarter? Is the historical fallacies depicted still there? No. It's like our government got a little wiser. You note that their meeting shows the spike, the roads of the West. Now, it doesn't say met together. We're just saying roads of the West. Cleverly used wording. I thought it was kind of cool to see that. But food for thought, well, in Philadelphia would still be, but what did the D mark? D would symbolize, and this is the D mark proof coin, but it meant dumber versus Bowie. This became a little story that was not released, but in the annals of romantic numismatic history. Oh, yes. As W.C. Fields would say, I love Mae West. But Mae West and her oogling fascination, now here is a movie star of that particular earlier time, she had an oogling desire after looking at the Indian depicted on Fraser's nickel, and that's on the right side of your screen. Of course, Miss West is on the left side as well. But she was just fascinated by the chief. And, your old saying, come up and see me sometime, request that she made actually to Mr. Fraser, the designer. She wanted to meet. Guess what? The Indian. Well, how do we handle this? And so she wrote the Secretary of the Treasury. I go one slide. Nope, we're all right. Anyway, she wrote the Secretary of the Treasury here, as you'll see a little bit down in the middle of your screen. Friday, September 28th, 1934. Was no exception to the routine. Anyway, we'll get back to Mr. O'Malley and his changing or his 2 cents on behalf of the ANA at the time. And we find that Mae West had wired the Secretary of the Treasury, asking him for help to find some young descendant of the American Indian who posed for the original Buffalo nickel. Imagine the Secretary of the Treasury getting a letter like this. Why? She wants to meet the handsomest, notice the word she used, handsomest descendant of this handsome, brave peer with her where? In films. Now, I'm a lady, she said in the letter, in which Mae West plays a cowgirl on a Montana ranch near an Indian reservation. She was informed that the Indian, she thought, would probably be up in Montana on an Indian reservation. See, the Treasury Department gives good information, doesn't it? So she set out with her studio traffic manager to find at all costs, spent all days and time running around looking for an Indian reservation there in Montana. She went and asked them repeatedly, I want to see an Indian in person, she smiled. Well, she said, I gotta have him for my picture. I've just got to. It's going to be everything. Well, did she ever know that Fraser's Indian portrait on the nickel was actually a composite of all three Indians? Obviously, the Secretary of the Treasury didn't tell her that. So let's move on here and see where we're going to go next. So now we have the scene set. And of course, Mae West. Well, we find lights, camera, numismatic change idea for scene 39. I just made up the number here for that. And West's reaction to that question. And for that question, I've got to go back here just a couple of, one slide here again. I should have separated the two here, but did not. I wanted to keep you all guessing. But ANA District Secretary F.O. Malley from Wathway, New Jersey, had a usual breakfast habit at home. This is where we get our information, where Mr. Rochette and the crew got their information. The breakfast ritual, coffee, morning, and the newspaper. Nowadays, we do it online, but think about reading that newspaper back in those days. And he would scan the newspaper, then clip out and forward items of numismatic interest to his friend Frank Duffield, editor of the Numismatist, which I'm sure you all enjoy today as well. So Friday there was the day, and we go back and see he actually talks about this letter. So let's go back here. Now we're going to get the one step. Well, not one to miss a chance. Mr. O'Malley decided to share a little bit of numismatic history in a letter that he penned to Mae West, informing her that the sculptor James Earl Fraser used not one but three different Indians to produce a composite portrait for the nickel. You and I as numismatists do this all the time. We love to share our stories about our hobby. The NA District Secretary, as it was called then, magnanimously offered a PS suggestion that Mae West rewrite the script and substitute a 260-pound Irishman. Guess who the name was? Mr. O'Malley there from the ANA for the part. Well, what do we find here in the next line? The stars replied, held true to form. Dear Mr. O'Malley, yours is a good idea, pure and simple. Well, anyway, simple. Well, what do we have here from a moral? Let's see. Well, Mae West never found her descendant of the Indian for the Buffalo nickel. She kept her part and took Mr. O'Malley's out. She's not going to have this part. But the title was changed to Going to Town. Critics gave the film, shall I say, I get so excited about this. They pointed to the fact that nothing never turned out as Mae West would thought. And here that not everything Mae West did was a perfection. And changing the title and taking out the Indian, and even taking out perhaps Mr. O'Malley, Going to Town was proof in the pudding. It was a flop, folks. All right, and here's one. Any of you, I love this particular story too, that we taking out of Ed book and bringing in live here. Annie Oakley, coin collector, minter, distributor of plug nickels. Ever thought about that? No, she was a good sharpshooter, don't you? Well, is this a truth, downright fib, or could it even be factual? Well, we explored this particular opportunity. Think about it. And now let's see for ourselves if it's truth or legend. What's the numismatic definition of the term plug nickel? We must first define that to see. The term, of course, is more elusive than one would imagine. It's not listed there or in any other dictionary. Oxford or Origin of Words, American Theophras has a slang, simply defines the meaning something worthless or insignificant. Yeah, I guess a plug nickel is, it's damaged, but it's probably still worth a nickel. But plug nickels have a place in numismatic history. If one lived and played games at venues such as clubs, bars, cigar stores, candy shops, etc., in the 1930s. Of course, with the fun and gaming machines, for example, pinball machines, and you folks remember those? There's still a few around. Instead of paying off scores of winners with US money, they paid them out in whole tokens, called plug nickels, so as not to violate the US law. Now note, these tokens were both whole and lighter in weight. Lead plugs were later added to call them plugged, or actually changed the term to plug nickels. Okay, so we'll take a look at Annie Oakley here and this story to see, well, maybe there is some truth to it. We got the definition of plug nickel. But how about her distributing plug nickels? Would that be against the law? Well, of course, I've got a couple of pictures here of her, and her over-the-shoulder shot here on the right, excuse me, from 1892 was one of her favorites. We shall see. Now, you might want to just raise up a little bit off your seats because we're going to show you one of Annie Oakley's plug nickels. Here's an example. Factual. Annie Oakley did actually produce many a plug nickel. There's a hole in it. Of course, in souvenir nickels that were tossed up in the air. She had also stamped her name on it. This is from a British copper from 1901. But would you not say that she actually produced coins or plug nickels? Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. See, Ed says, nah, the fact that she didn't is not true because here's an example. There were many of these produced by her as well. And here, just for fun of it, this is one that Ed and the group made up just for the heck of it. A look at a genuine created plug Jefferson nickel from 1980. Kind of little things that we could do just to add a little bit more of interest to this romantic story. And for those of you that may not know what a plug nickel is, I put a couple of shots in here. Plug nickels, here's in 1796 on the left plug from a large set. Copper being inserted, probably was made into a jewelry piece at one time. This is a slab and certified courtesy of Heritage Auctions, and a plug business token. This was probably some of those ones that were used during the 1930s elsewhere. So now you know what a plug nickel looks like. Well, we're getting down to number 8 of 12. This is something here that I'm not going to spend much time reading because I'll let you read the story afterwards on the program if you revisit it, which I hope you will, or you'll revisit it in Ed's book. But the origin of the sign of the dollar. Now, there's been many myths, many thoughts, and on this opening slide here, I have some of the designs that were talked about. But the dollar sign has 2 distinct meanings. And of course, number 1 there is on top from the early 1700s. I'll go into detail in just a little bit. The second one comes from the later 1700s, the US dollar sign or symbol. Now you'll notice on the first row there, we have at the top in the green, the PS. Okay. And then we have a design with the S over the P, just 1 bar, and then the 1 bar dollar design. However, the US also came up with their design, and we'll talk a little bit about that in just a second. But here we have on the bottom, the top ones was from Mexico or Spain. Spanish influence in that particular designs. So here the US symbol. Now notice the dollar sign here. It seems that when this was done, the U was not completed at the bottom for some reason, but it meant US, which was translated into the dollar sign having two bars. Okay, now let's move on here. Let's take a look at an 1891 $2 note reverse with a strange US sign and wording. First time being used, silver certificate, $2. If you'll note the design of the purple arrows there on the left and right of the dollar note here, $2 note here, you'll see that the symbol US over it. Okay. Okay, on one side, and then you'll take a look at the orange one, or the dark orange in the middle, above it where it says the word silver. Now, at the particular time that this note was released, theory and legend and tales and all sorts of stories surrounded the design there used in the purple arrows, the US with the one line through it with a dot above it. Now, keep in mind, there's a dot above it. Meant US, meant dollar. It did not. It stood for US, it stood for US silver. That's the actual factual truth, not that. So we'll move on a little bit more here to explore. Okay, we'll take a look at the earlier Spanish ones that I talked about on the first part of your chart. 1768 Spanish dollar coin with the sign PS or SP. But take a look now at the green arrows near the date, and you'll see only one vertical line. That identifies it as being used as the sign for, in other words, Spanish silver or Spanish pieces of silver. That just simply put it on there. It has a dollar sign, notice. One especially here on the right side of the screen with the left arrow shows it looks like $2. It has the dot above it. Again, the US $2 note that we just saw had the dot above it too. Hence the confusion around the origin of the dollar sign itself. Well, here's one just for the heck of it in the newspaper from the Civil War time with the two lines. I'm not so sure about the dollar sign with the snake, but anyway, not a hissing snake, just printed in an 1861 newspaper. So, attributions to the origins of the dollar sign. A few secrets and attributions to these signs are mysterious in origin over the years. And there are basically 5 areas that we need to look at. It was hypothesized that the dollar sign originated with the Pillars of Hercules. Well, just as a tale we're going to see in just a moment. Now, B there, dollar sign was attributed to Spain because of the 2 pillars on its larger coins. Nope. Another tale. Number C, Spain, again, because of the SP appearance and the coin we just looked at earlier, but it only had 1 vertical line through it, not 2. So that is not the origin. D, credited to US investor Oliver Pollock, April 1st, 1778, based on a design he used on his financial letters. Okay, possibly, but more likely just conjecture. Spanish influence again, because it applied the term MP for Mexican peso. Likely, well, true, we're not sure. Now we see here what Mr. Rochette's research did here for the romance story. Well, finally, Mr. Rochette in the 80s and his research team discovered a bunch of factual documents published on the evolution of the mathematical dollar sign in a popular science monthly magazine of December 2012 by a gentleman called Dr. Florin Caroli. Any idea as to where his research work is stored, where his papers are, where he did all his work? You'll be totally surprised. No, it's not the ANA building, but close by, as we'll see. So here are the facts of the origin. Did I skip a slide again? Nope. Gotta get these things. Come on, there we go. My mouse is sleeping. Now to the definitive answer as to the factual origin of the US dollar sign. Well, what do you know? At Colorado College, Colorado Springs, Colorado, residing in the archives of the mathematics department. Why, that's just a stone's throw away from the ANA headquarters itself. Yes, it is. Well, there seems to be a numismatic history that is not covered. Factual history. Well, Edgard had a long way to go to do his research here, but he made it right in his own backyard. Let's go on here. This is a reading here, and I'm not going to go through because it'll take time. We've got a couple of more to cover here, but he was a professor of physics at the time, math later, and dean of the Department of Engineering at Colorado College. The title of his published work, and as I mentioned, the Popular Science Monthly, The Evolution of It. And it also appeared, here's some type for you to go and look through ANA research at our old numismatists. If you want to read this article, it's fascinating to read it. But the article was reprinted in the 1929 Numismatist. And here's some excerpts from the article, which debunk all the 5 other thoughts that we saw just a little bit earlier. So we come down to number 6 here in green, is where we're going to begin with the actual truth and findings by Dr. Caroli. The first use of the United States was US over 1, documented in US Mint records of 1792 from Robert Morris, the great American financier, but with, at that time, just a single stroke. So it wasn't quite completed yet. See, this is where the debate still surrounds today. Well, concluding note is down there by Mr. Caroli, and he went on to say that the second sign was added later on. No one knows factually exactly when, sometime after 1912. But his papers are still there, and the house is long gone down there at Wood Avenue at the beginning. But it's now a girls' sorority house, and I'm sure they enjoyed having that dollar sign there. Well, any hobby has countless innovations and has contributed much to our language. Think about what we as collector hobbyists of money have given others. Yes, numismatics, Ed found out, can be legitimate claim and fame for objects of their collecting interests, which have led to the development of numerous innovations of utilitarian nature. Coins, for example, what did they lead to? Well, not just US coins, but coins in general. For example, led to the development of what? Production of cashiers, fare boxes, piggy banks, counters, weighers, vending machine, and of course the fun hobby and major industry of countries making money, whether it be in paper form or whether it be in coin form. However, 2 of the most obvious creations devised, which you and I still use today, or many of you don't, maybe not if you're into the cashless society, use credit cards, but let's assume for the moment that you still use these 2 items, the pocket, which I put my pens and glasses and so forth in. Think about the early times. People didn't use them for those type of things. The pocket and the pocketbook or purse for women. Both of these carried 2 coins to carry their coins. But before that, what did they use? Cloth bags in a diaper-like accessory, which hung on a codpiece from their belts. Question, what did coins in the purse give the numismatists? Well, here's one here for you. Love to do this research. Answer, the name of a coin show sales area called Bourse, meaning what? Coin in a purse. Wow. We should be proud that we've given a lot to it. Anything else of note? Yes. Let's move on. When the first stock exchanges were established in Paris in the 16th century, And then elsewhere, they became bourses, a term synonymous with what? Money markets. You heard the word today? Where money is sold. Money markets also receiving to stock exchanges, financial institutions, banks as well. So we've given quite a bit. Just a few more examples. I thought some of these were you find interesting. But carpetbagger, scallywag, two important terms of the Civil War. How about wildcat banks? How about the term free banking system? Principal bank office. Oh boy, goodness, there's a whole lot here. People that, well, you can look at this Wildcat Banks story here. I'll let you read it at your leisure. But the script often called Wildcat certificates or Wildcat money. A collecting field. Any of you out there watching collect Wildcat certificates? Wildcat money? Well, might be worth something. It's just script for hard cash, gold, and silver. But the script actually had nothing, just printed paper. It's like a broken banknote. A few more terms: carpetbaggery, carpetbaggism, wildcatter. But what about the modern wording of tricky dick? Well, that's a possibility too, that it came from money sources. Well, we're coming down to the end of the program. We've got a few minutes left here. I'm going to finish up with a couple of quick thoughts. What coins of or for the rock? Romantic story involved here? Well, what's your thoughts as to being the romance tale of fact or fiction? From where can you view the rock? What did or does the rock coinage look like? A closer look at the rock itself for choices. So now that I've planted the seed of the word rock in your honor, or the rock, what does it bring to mind? Well, you're going to have two choices. The one on the left there, you have Alcatraz, San Francisco Bay, which is closed now, but a beautiful place. Or the rock number 2 from Gibraltar, the British Commonwealth. So first we have to make that choice as to which one. Well, the story here goes that people always associate the term the rock with Alcatraz. Well, it can be, but it's also associated even more so with the British coin from Gibraltar. And it's interesting to note that Mr. Rochette wants us to take a look at a symbol on the coin itself. Here we have a 1967 1 crown coin, and has the reverse on the right there. And notice the green arrow between the date 19 and 67. There's a key hanging from the tower. So what's the thought? And well, the fact or fibbed or story at the time, and it's still used today, it was simply that was the key to the castle gate. Again, not so. In fact, Gibraltar here is pictured on a $20 and no longer uses the key. But what could the key symbolize? Something simple that people just continue to overlook. Whoops, we're not going to get to that. But it means it's the key to the Mediterranean. And that's what it's always meant. Yet it just seems to be told some other false story behind it. And as we're concluding our story here, well, I was there, and I'm sure maybe some of you might have been there as well. But we're talking about here, the first, what we called A&A mid-year show, or winter show, some people dubbed it as, was held in Colorado Springs. And because Colorado is known for its snow and ice, was that particular event, the very first one, headed for disaster and loss of collectors, much like the Titanic here hitting an iceberg on its maiden voyage. So this is A&A's maiden attempt at an early spring show in 1978. Well, let's see. Well, of course, it's the only show held on ice. Many of you may not have known that. The Broadmoor has gone under undergone many a change over the years, and it was held in the Broadmoor Hotel at the old ice skating rink, which of course would be on the far side across the lake before a bridge was put in. And of course, it's now gone and moved off site. But the question remains, did an icy cold iceberg cover that skating rink floor? Well, it seemed inevitable that it'd have sunk the A&A show. The answer is no, unlike the Titanic's doom fate in 1912. Fact is, the icy cold Boris floor, which had wooden planks over the old ice skating rink, and we'll get a view of that in just a second here, but did give dealers and determined dedicated numismatic hobbyists a few shivers, but not the frostbite when it came to seeking out and buying coins, currency, tokens, etc. for their own collections. I will state that I made, as a lot of dealers did, we spent about 20 minutes outside, went outside to warm up, went back in again to freeze, came back out to warm up again. We had more gathering outside than inside. And here is the official program from that particular time. Mr. Bill Henderson was the general chairman of the show, as you can see from the program here, postmarked on it, as it was the case at that time. But here we have a chance to see the Bourse floor. On the right is the floor before the wooden planks were placed on the floor. Above it, you can see the right and the outside one. There's a little rink behind the banners where the scoreboard is. There's a smaller rink. That's the studio arena. That was for younger kids, for people practicing, learning, and training. But it was cold and shivering. Oh, it sounds like a disaster for the A&A for its first mid-year show. Well, they had some special banquet keynote feature speakers at that time. Mrs. Stella Hackle, who was then the director of the U.S. Mint, and Mrs. Betty Higbee, who at the time was also the Denver Mint superintendent. They were the keynote and featured forum speakers. And then somebody, well, we're not going to go into much of this, a little younger guy here that's speaking to you today with both these individuals at the forums. But the moral here for this particular story is that every collector that left the building, once they went outside to warm up, you can get several of these. It was the first and only A&A show, early spring show, to have a remembrance gift poster. They also had bumper stickers, but I couldn't find mine, which went to all those things. And so this is something too that the A&A and our numismatic hobby has given us. The first coin show on ice. Marvelous thing. Nice art design. I never did know who designed it. We couldn't figure it out. The show went on. Well, trying to hit that 1 hour mark, and I skipped over a lot of stuff, but I hope folks will read it. So all one needs, for our numismatic hobby enjoyment and fun is an adventure. Fact or tale, a lot of time, love, and of course, a lot of money, and money to crow about too. So as we're winding down here, I'm going to leave you with the last little tidbit. For those of you that want to leave something, as Ed left to many of us at many a time during Christmas and other holidays. Fact or fiction, the magical gift. Now, this can be seen on page 177 of Ed's book. It's the ideal year-round gift for numismatists of all ages. So I hope you think about passing one along, because you can decide if it has the magic within it. And the magic is shown out here in a little figure. But these were a little money drawing dollies. Dollies, that sounds like his wife. Yes, it was. And anyway, the magic was sewn into the inside of it. And he would give a lot of these to people as gifts, as well as his wife, first wife. Possibly a Lincoln cent, 1909 is VDB, 14D. Well, maybe even a rare 43 copper. But if you believe in it, believe in the magic of the hobby, believe in truth, fact, fiction, legends, tales, our hobby has all sorts of fun things. I know it's been a brief, I try to run through this, but I hope that you were romanticized and entertained by this small sampling of selected romance tales within numismatic lore from the hundreds published in Mr. Rochette's book. Now, this is the first attempt, or mine attempt as a speaker, to list these events from his book on the big Zoom silver screen, courtesy of the ANA's e-learning academy and NumismaTalks program. Oh, I do encourage you to check out, which is available in our library, Ed's book, and read it. I don't know, someday I'm sure it'll be put online completely, but it's nice to have. But should you have any unsettling thoughts or questions or negative romance lore vibes, let me know. Here's my email here as well. And I'll turn it back over to our host, Paula.
Thank you so much, Walt, for a great presentation, and everybody that's joined in. If you have questions now, please go ahead and put those in the Q&A box. As of right now, we just have a thank you for an excellent presentation, Walt, and I do appreciate that. And while we wait and see if any questions pop up, I was just going to let everybody know that our Numisma Talks are being recorded and are available once they're edited, so it does take a little bit of time, at our new e-learning academy. That is a new member benefit for all ANA members. If you have not gotten your login yet, you can go to the money.org and go to education, and it will just walk you right through getting your login and get set so you can come and see all of these Numisma Talks that our lovely presenters provide for us. I would also say check out our future events coming up. We are scheduled through September, so please see what's out there. And I think we are not having questions, so I just want to thank you again, Walt, and thank everybody for joining us.
Didn't expect any questions. This is something they can read and give them thought. Food for thought. That's the best we can do.
Yep, sometimes questions, sometimes not. So
don't worry about it. Thank you, Paul. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Walt. Thanks, everybody.
Have a good